Details that are vital. Little things make big things happen. Swift put out an announcement where they were talking about settling tokens on Swift GPI. So they're going to need different protocols in order to enable this. But in the press release, they also talked about interoperability with other projects that are exploring these technologies. So it's not just Swift. In my opinion, Swift is going to be something of the past. We're not going to even know about Swift. Swift was supposed to be this neutral thing like the post office in order to make money move around the world. But that's not what ended up happening. The US took control of Swift, and now they're trying to keep up. Swift GPI was a reaction to RippleNet, and now they're going from the faster payments that was a clone of RippleNet to a ledger that's able to take on tokens, securities, digital assets, right? So when they say digital assets, they're not talking about crypto assets. They're talking about tokenized securities, tokenized bonds, and things to that nature. So in this video, I just want to explore some of these topics and talk about some of these other protocols that are tying into Swift GPI. And ultimately, this is all about tokenizations of security, settling tokens on chain. And that's where I think the floodgates open into the crypto world. So I'm going to explore some of these other projects as well and some of the protocols that are involved with these projects.
That an application can only produce high-quality results with high-quality data. Chainlink provides decentralized applications with the definitive truth about the external world, so they can trigger reliable, real-world outcomes. You have probably heard how blockchain-based smart contract applications will change the way the world exchanges value and facilitates agreements. But there is a problem. A blockchain security is derived from a decentralized network of independent validators who purposefully limit their connection to the outside world. To securely retrieve data from the outside world, smart contracts require an additional piece of infrastructure known as an oracle. The data that controls smart contracts needs to meet the highest possible standards, because it will directly control billions and eventually trillions of dollars in value. But what if you could leverage the same decentralized computation guarantees used to secure the blockchain to securely retrieve and validate the data smart contracts require? Chainlink is a decentralized oracle network that provides smart contracts a tamper-proof and highly available connection to all of the world's highest quality data feeds. With Chainlink, a smart contract can access data pertaining to financial markets, cryptocurrency prices, weather, sports results, IoT sensor readings, and any other real-world validated data needed to enable more robust and useful blockchain-based applications.
Chainlink's design, CCIP, is much different than the XRP ledger. Chainlink's design has to do with data. It's bringing on data from the real world into blockchains. Most blockchains have the ability to issue tokens. But what good is that if you don't know Bitcoin's price and you're issuing Bitcoin IOUs on the XRP ledger? There needs to be data from the outside to come on chain. Now, when we look at Swift GPI, we automatically assume that there's going to be some tokens that settle the payments on Swift. But first of all, Swift is not even settling any payments. It's for messaging. It's to send messages from one bank to another bank. So therefore, there's absolutely no reason to assume that any token's going to be some type of settlement vehicle within Swift, because it doesn't do that. Swift needs data. So Chainlink is perfect for that, because let's say you have a CBDC from Thailand and you have a CBDC from the UK and you have a CBDC from the United States. It's got to know the prices of all of those CBDCs and at the time that it was sent. So at 11:45 a.m., it's a certain price, and an hour from now, it's going to be a different price. Chainlink needs to have authentic data that everybody could trust and verify. Now, the evolution of Swift was first it created GPI, and this was a response to RippleNet. If you look back at some of the videos that Swift provided, They talk about a small player that's disrupting the industry, and this was their reaction with Swift GPI. Later down the road, they talked about onboarding CBDCs, and now they're talking about onboarding digital assets. But when they say digital assets, they're not talking about crypto. They're talking about equities, because right now it's T+3, T+2, and this is the amount of days it takes to settle a transaction after you send it to the stock market and back to your account. Usually it's 2 days, maybe 3 days. So Swift incorporating CBDCs and then going the next step to the stock market is the most logical conclusion, and it fits the bill. Now, when you look into the documentation with Swift, they specifically say they're going to use Chainlink's CCIP. And that's the big thing, right? Is having a currency and then having their stock market next. And this is part that underlies Swift and Chainlink's cross-chain interoperability protocol to integrate legacy systems with the blockchains. So the way they have this is completely opposite of using any type of crypto asset for settlement. What they're saying is, all right, there's an Ethereum smart contract. If this result happens, then you get paid. Smart contract gets executed, and they have an integration of a Swift API. So the smart contract triggers a Swift message to be issued. At the end of the day, the Swift message is sent to the other bank, and the bank knows that whoever owes whatever money because the smart contract issued it. It's completely opposite of having a digital asset as a currency layer. It's having Swift as an API in a blockchain. Do you remember when ISO 222 was this really big deal? Well, ISO was a standard, payment standard that Swift GPI incorporated. And across the board, you saw all of these different financial applications, financial services switching to ISO. And really, Ripple was behind a lot of the ISO movement, but it's a standardization of payments. So an ISO message could theoretically go from Swift GPI to RippleNet and still be the same message. It's interoperable across the board. Again, Swift is messaging, it's not settlement. So we saw that in the announcement, they talked about the regulated settlement network. They wanted to specifically interlink separate blockchain networks, for example, using regulated settlement network. And regulated settlement network, it's regulated liability network. So in the Swift press release, not only did they say that they were using Chainlink CCIP, but they want to also interlink with other platforms such as the U.S. Regulated Settlement Network. And then they also want to link to Project Agora, Bank of International Settlements-led project exploring integration into tokenized commercial banks. You remember Citibank decided to tokenize deposits recently, and then wholesale CBDCs on a unified platform. So you consistently see the word unified platform. And it's important to take note that this regulated settlement network is an evolution of the regulated liability network. So the regulated settlement network proof of concept is designed to explore and use of shared ledger among permissioned parties to settle tokenized deposits and reserves, U.S. Treasury securities, and other assets. By bringing all these assets and liabilities onto the same ledger, this proof of concept explores the feasibility to interoperate networks for multi-asset transactions and operates 24/7. This work builds on the results of a previous industry proof of concept, the regulated liability network.
So RLN means we're creating a new form of money with the commercial banks having a say of what this looks like. And this is all down to programmability. By having logic and programmability built into money itself, we're moving from electronic money to digital, and we're creating the foundation of digital finance. So the RLM project is starting with payments and settlements, but the goal and the vision is to create a common venue, a common platform for all forms of assets, all forms of instruments to settle with digital money. The RLN is a platform for innovation. It's being built and co-designed with all the commercial banks and institutions having a say. The whole vision of RLN is to create a new form of money for different types of instruments, different types of assets to be used across a shared venue. And the goal and the future vision is to make this into potentially a new FMI. And that means a regulated entity running all forms of money and assets.
When you look at some of the different tokenization projects, JP Morgan talks about the unified ledger, and it says that it would rather have a unified ledger than an open protocol. And of course, banks are going to say that because they want control of private ledgers and they want control in general. So if everything was on public chains, there'd be no need for banks. So the banks are always going to argue that point, but he specifically says the unified ledger or similar ideas such as the regulated liability network, mBridge, or Singapore's global layer 1. So we know the regulated liability network is utilizing quant that enables the banks to have those walled gardens, right? So the API calls the walled garden and then the public chain. So there's a buffer, and that's the preference of the big banks. But when you look into global layer 1, which is out of Singapore, it talks about this. Moz announced 5 more use cases: JP Morgan Apollo initiative on tokenized funds, Citi Fidelity and T. Rowe Price using FX and oracles for trades on Avalanche. So Avalanche is also involved with some of these bigger bank initiatives, and I found that interesting. So far we have Chainlink, Quant, and now Avalanche. Avalanche is using some of its subnet features, so it's not exactly on the public chain, but it's a subnet of Avalanche that can connect to the public chains, much like XRP's vision of sidechains. Since Swift is doing these proof of concepts, the regulated liability network, the regulated settlement network, the unified ledger, Swift, they're all trying to go after the same thing: bring treasuries on chain and then securities. So Treasury Securities is the name of the game. That's like the base level of money in all markets. It's the foundation of all markets, and that's what you really need to pay attention to. That's where the trillions come in. Now, I wanted to bring everyone's attention to this 21X since it's in the spirit of securities and tokenization of securities. Now, they have regulations under the EU DLT pilot regime. Since MiCA came out, there's more regulations that allow this project to actually take place. So you can see that they're going after stocks, bonds, and funds under the EU regulated DLT framework. Now, when you look at some of the things that they're doing, you'll see that they're trying to go after Apex Group partnered with them. So 21X and Apex, a global financial, forged a strategic partnership to enable listing of tokenized securities on the 21X platform. Now, they're doing this under the ESMA, the European Securities Market Authority, and secure compliant avenue for trading and settling tokens. Now, right now, if you look at 21X, you look at their site, you'll see that they have a multi-chain approach. So what that means is they plan on using any chain that the customer wants. They first launched on Polygon or Matic. The first versions on Matic through Solidity, so an EVM type of code. And they're going to use different chains, and that includes permission chains, so R3, Corda, those types of chains. You can see here that they have Ethereum, Stellar, Solana, Base, Avalanche, and Aleph Zero. Now, the reason why I like Aleph Zero is because of it has privacy embedded on the chain. So right here, when they're talking about using Matic, they need to use instances with ZK, EVM. they need to have like these clunky solutions for privacy. The markets require privacy, especially in the EU. That's going to be part of the law. So having it embedded on chain is just a more secure feature. When you look at a Left Zero has just gotten hammered. While, Matic crawled up the ranks, it was at one point a very large market cap. Well, I believe Left Zero is at like in the hundreds of millions. And, it's not exclusively a Left Zero, but I like what they're doing. There's also articles about 21X partnered with SBI. So SBI Ripple Asia. This is the digital markets. They plan to list Asian tokenized securities on 21X under the launch of the EU DLT pilot regime. Now, you may remember that will also be made available to investors at Apex, Singapore, Thailand, and Japan. So the reason why this is a big deal is like, I'm a U.S. citizen, so I can invest easily in U.S. equities, Tesla, Microsoft, whatever. But if I wanted to buy a Canadian company, I have to pay a lot of fees, go on to TD Ameritrade. And that's just Canada. If I wanted like an Asian stock market, I would have to buy some type of, wrapped ETF that has Asian equities on it. So tokenized securities is an awesome use case. And this is where we're going to see a lot of money flow into this market. And since they have a multi-chain approach, imagine just $3 trillion in assets coming into those chains. And let's say it's not even distributed evenly. There's going to be overflow into the different chains, and all those chains are going to benefit. Say $3 trillion in funds for its clients. That's a big deal, and I'm excited to see this. Once you see things like that, you're going to see the really cool use cases being unlocked. The other thing I wanted to mention is I talked about the Treasury market. So DTCC are pushing the boundaries of tokenized collateral management under the recent UST collateral network pilot aimed how DLT can improve liquidity and efficiency. And they're operating all the nodes on the Canton network. Now, the Canton network is set up sort of like how the XRP ledger was talking about side chains, having all the different side chains. Well, that's how the Canton network is set up. So imagine a public chain where all these side chains can interact with the public chain. And that's what banks are looking for. They want chains that they control everything, and then it just connects to a public chain where it's all written in stone. Now, you may remember the Linux Foundation. Hedera recently contributed code to the Linux Foundation, and the Canton network is using that. So all of these different private chains connect to a public chain. Public mainnet, I believe, launched, and I believe there's going to be a token. So it's something that I'm looking forward to investing with. It seems like they have a lot of big banks using different side chains of the Canton network. A DTCC in the U.S. Treasury, like I said, having treasuries on chain would be the foundation of this tokenized future. So since DTCC is using a side chain of Canton, I can imagine a lot of utility coming down the road for the Canton network. The beauty of life is in small details, not in big events. Thanks everyone, I hope you enjoyed the show. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. If you enjoy content like this, please consider joining my Patreon or my ghost site, dmjr.ghost.io.